Welcome to a Greenville County Library System virtual event. My name is Rachel, and I'm the Adult Outreach and Event Coordinator for the library system. I'm so pleased that you could join us tonight for this event, Paint Your Watershed, presented by Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. If you're interested in our other virtual events and activities, please check out our website, greenvillelibrary.org, and select Adult Virtual Events. That's under our Classes and Events tab to see our live virtual events calendar. Now is a great time to start the Winter Reading Challenge if you haven't already. You have until March 1st to complete just one row on the Winter Reading Bingo card. Go to greenvillelibrary.org/winter reading to get more details. You get prizes just for completing the challenge, like a limited edition winter reading mug. That's available to the first 300 folks to participate and complete the challenge. And then everyone who completes will get a free pastry voucher from Swamp Rabbit Cafe and Grocery. And then everyone who completes will also be entered into a prize drawing for our grand prizes. We're offering a Kindle Paperwhite and then also free tickets to a reading appreciation night with Greenville's very own Swamp Rabbits hockey team. So check that out. Now, if you're interested in checking out gardening and sustainability materials or arts and crafts materials, make sure that your library card is up to date and come visit us at any of our locations. We look forward to serving you soon. Now, please join me in welcoming our presenter for today, Shanine with Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Rachel. I'm so excited to be with you this evening. Let's just go ahead and jump right in. Today, we're going to talk about watersheds. And while I teach you a little bit about what a watershed is, you all are going to create some beautiful watercolor paintings that represent some of the major components of watersheds. Before we get started, let me get to my presenting. Again, I'm Shanine. I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator with Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. And we are a district that works in Greenville County to promote water health and soil health. Rachel is our moderator, and like she already mentioned, if you have questions or anything, go ahead and type them in the chat box, and she'll go ahead and make sure that those get answered as we go. Ask questions at any time throughout the evening. I'm happy to answer. And yeah, we'll just go that way. To get started, I'm hoping that most of you have these things put together already, but go ahead and gather your materials. Obviously, y'all have a computer or phone with internet connection because you're on this call with us. Go ahead, make sure you have your kit. I recommend having 1 or 2 cups of water with you for washing brushes, and then we'll also wet our canvas a few times, so a clean cup of water is helpful as well. I also like to have a newspaper or paper towel around, especially for underneath my canvas, but also to dab off brushes, test colors before you put them on your painting, things like that. Also, if you're able to set up your virtual learning space, like Rachel mentioned, ensure you're muted, and if you can have your video on, I would love that. I want to see your creations as they go, and I'm more able to help troubleshoot if I can see what you're doing. And if you can rename yourself, I didn't have time to do this today, but with your first name, last initial, and your pronouns, I want to make sure I'm addressing everyone in the way they are most comfortable this evening. And we already talked about questions. If y'all could give me a thumbs up once you're ready to move on, we'll go ahead and get started. Great. Yes, yes, yes. I'm so excited. This will be fun. Fair warning, I am not an artist, but I did my very best, and I think I have some good instructions for you. So I'll give basic instructions, but feel free to use your creative ingenuity to make a masterpiece all your own. Okay. So here are some examples of what we put together and like an idea of the very basic of what you should be able to get to tonight. I'm so excited for this. And we'll talk about why we have some of these different pieces in these paintings as we go. Before we start painting, I want to ask you all, what is a watershed? So go ahead, you can type your answer in the chat box. You can either use the numbers there or the words. Numbers are probably easier, but what is a watershed? Number 1, a shed where water is stored. Number 2, an area of land that drains to the same place or body of water. Or number 3, a large lake or water body where we get our drinking water. Go ahead and type your answers in the chat box. Rachel, if you could let me know kind of general consensus. Y'all a couple more seconds here.
Looks like most people are saying number 2.
Okay. Great. I'm so excited that y'all said that because you are correct. A watershed is exactly that, an area of land and water that drains into the same location or body of water, like a lake or a river, and eventually everything leads to the ocean. Its boundaries are high points like mountains, hills, even small little elevation points in your yard could be considered sub-watersheds in between those elevation points. Gravity is the main force that carries water through a watershed. So if you think about that, water is never going to go up and over, naturally go up and over a mountain range. Water is never naturally going to flow up and over a hill unless the gravity force is strong enough to have it come up and down a little bit, which is how some water systems are actually built. This little illustration that you can see on your screen is a good representation of kind of some major components in watersheds. Watersheds include everything in that land area. So we're not just talking about the water, we're talking about the forest, the trees, the farms, the houses, any kind of building or factory. We're also talking about the water we can't see. And that's what we call groundwater or aquifers. There are communities throughout the United States that actually get their drinking water from an aquifer. If y'all know anybody that uses a well or has a private well on their property, that water is coming from groundwater or aquifers as well. Just kind of a fun fact there as we go. So let's get started painting. If y'all are ready, now that we know the basics of what a watershed is, we're going to build the basic outline for our painting. So you're going to want to go ahead, take your biggest brush. I don't know if y'all have like a larger brush than what we were able to provide, that'd be great right now. Get it wet with just some clean water and wet down just the top half of your canvas. You can orient this horizontally, vertically. I don't mind, whatever feels right. This is what I came up with earlier today, but there is no right or wrong here. Once you want that to be wet but not soaking, no pools or anything. If you do have that, just dab them off. And this just helps your colors kind of blend and run in that classic watercolor way. Once you have that, what I did to get the mountain colors is mix a whole bunch of brown with a little bit of the greens, kind of whatever feels right, maybe a little black too to get some darkness, and just create a ridge line. Can be however many little ridges you want. Your sky could be a sunset. Your sky can be just a blue, beautiful blue sky or a night sky. And you can mix some blues together for that blue sky, or if you'd rather do, I don't know if this is a sunset or a sunrise, whichever you think, but start with some oranges, go to reds and purples up on the top. But again, having some wetness on your canvas will help those colors blend a little bit too. So don't be afraid to get creative. One of my favorite things about using watercolors is that it's very easy to correct mistakes too. So if you're not happy with something that you have, just grab a paper towel or a tissue or a little cloth and wipe that right off before it dries and you can fix it. So the peaks that we are creating in this kind of outline are the representation of a high point in a watershed. And then our sky, well, there's sky everywhere, first of all. But we'll talk about stormwater a little while later, and stormwater is the main component that, or the main thing that adds water back into our water system. But we'll talk about the importance of stormwater in a little bit. Give y'all a little time to paint before I move on, but feel free as we go tonight to just paint while I talk. If you have questions or can look up every now and then and see an image or something, I'll let you know if there's something real important. But yeah, there's no right or wrong, and we're all good. Okay, so I'm gonna just talk again. Keep on painting. Let me know if you have questions. So I want to talk about watersheds on kind of a national scale before we move on, and we'll get more and more locally specific as we go. Watersheds, like I said, everybody is in a watershed all the time. So like the earth is one big old watershed, and that is cut down into smaller watersheds based on, again, high points, which are mountains on most landforms. We can see here kind of the main watersheds in the United States. The Missouri watershed is huge, and they're named for the largest body of water in that area. So the Missouri watershed, the Missouri River runs through that watershed. The two Mississippi watersheds, the Mississippi River runs there. Actually, there is just kind of a central watershed in the center of the United States that is between the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains, and that covers 31 states. So everything kind of in the middle here, from about the upper Colorado over to us, actually, and we are in the South Atlantic Gulf watershed. That can all be considered one large watershed as well. That drains into the Gulf of Mexico. So us in Greenville, South Carolina, we are in that South Atlantic Gulf watershed. And an interesting piece on that is we are right on the line. So some of the water that we see here goes into the Charleston Bay area. And some of the water that we see, especially if we drive up towards Asheville, will actually end up in the Gulf of Mexico, depending on where you are on the ridgeline. Okay. So I have another question. I'm going to pause your painting for just a moment. Do you know what watershed, what sub-watershed Greenville is located in? Greenville County or Greenville City? Number 1 is Greenville. Number 2, Reedy. Number 3, Saluda. Or number 4, Table Rock.
Looks like we're split between Reedy and Saluda, but I think Reedy is winning currently, number 2.
Oh, great. Okay, those of you that have your video on, did anybody, the correct answer, first we'll say this, the correct answers are Reedy and Saluda. It was a trick question, and we're gonna see a map in just a little bit that explains why it's both of those. But those are the two major rivers that run through Greenville County. There's also the Enoree and one more in the northern part of the county that we here in Greenville City don't see too often. We'll talk about why Greenville and Table Rock tend to get people a little bit confused too. Those are actually areas of protected land, and Table Rock is a reservoir that we get drinking water from in Greenville. Okay, y'all are so smart. This is awesome. So I hope that your painting is going well. I'm excited to see them at the end. If you haven't started already, we can go ahead and add some waterways into our painting and some foreground. What I did again was wet down the piece of canvas that I haven't painted yet before I added in color. And then The only really important thing with your waterways is that they do not start at the top of your mountains. Water has to accumulate and gain force and friction and all of those things to actually come into a tributary or a stream. So what I tried to do was create waterways kind of in between my mountains, because that's where you're most likely going to start to see water. Um, Other than that, get creative. I just did a little snaking river here, but you can maybe have that like come into a little lake in the beginning. Um, if you're new to painting or color or whatever, it helps to get perspective if things start very small in the back and then get bigger as you come forward. So I use the tip of my brush at the very beginning of my rivers and then slowly kind of use more of my brush as I came forward and did a couple strokes in the very front of my painting or in the foreground. Okay, we talked about that. So then the foreground, like we mentioned before, can be whatever you want it to be. It can be farmland. It can be your neighborhood. It can be, um, I don't know, a little factory or your schoolyard or anything you want it to be. My painting skills are not great, so mine was just a grassy pasture or land area. But really get creative with that. Um, Also, it helps right now just to kind of get the basic colors down. We'll add details in a little bit once it dries because we can layer colors too. If y'all are getting comfortable with that, I'll just keep giving painting instructions and then let y'all go. We can add, once your mountains start to dry a little bit, you can start to add some dimension to those as well. So mixing a little bit more black or brown and making the mountains closer to you in the foreground a little bit darker than the ones further away. That's going to give you some perspective as well. Also a little bit of extra color in the sky if you want. Yeah. If you need to soften any lines, you can add a little bit of just clean water to those lines too to help blend a little bit. Just be careful of adding too much because these are not the top of the line watercolors, so you can actually wash them away with too much water. Anybody have any questions yet? All right, well, you all are creating your foreground. I'm going to go ahead and speak a little bit more about watersheds on a smaller, more local scale. So now we're going to talk about watersheds in South Carolina. Here's a map of our beautiful state. And the color groups, so the green and the blue and the pink and the yellow, are all larger watersheds. And it's a real tiny image here in the corner. But Greenville County is located in the Santee watershed on a larger scale. And then if we come in closer, we can see the blue line, and I'm going to use my mouse. Hopefully y'all can see that. This blue line here is the Reedy River, and Greenville falls somewhere in here. We'll see another map that actually has Greenville on it. Here's the Enoree watershed here, this little bit darker green, and the Enoree River runs through that. The Tiger watershed is right here. And those are kind of, this is all Greenville County here. And then the Saluda River runs right next to the Reedy. And that is also part of Greenville County. The interesting thing I want us to kind of notice in this picture as well, two things really. One, all of this green, the water that we use here in Greenville County in the northern part of the watershed eventually travels all the way down to Charleston. Charleston's kind of right in here. So anything south of Greenville County is going to see the same water that we see here. Another interesting thing and important thing to remember about natural spaces in general, they don't follow man-made lines. So really, our water is coming from somewhere up in North Carolina. and running all the way through down to the Atlantic Ocean. The PD watershed, we can see the majority of that is actually in North Carolina. So that is on the state scale. On a county scale, watersheds get even more divided. So we here in Greenville, we're kind of right in here, Greenville City. I'm at the county offices, so that's kind of how I orient myself on this map. So we are in the Reedy River, or the Reedy watershed, because the Reedy River runs through. The Saluda watershed, the Saluda River borders the county. So part of the Saluda watershed is in Greenville County, and part is in Pickens, part is in Anderson, and I think it comes down into Abbeville County just a little bit too. Yeah, so if y'all can take a minute and maybe figure out if you can orient yourself on this map where you might be, and type in the chat box which watershed you are located in based on this map of Greenville County. And I know it's not great, so if you're kind of on a border or you think you might be on a border, that's okay too. Just give us your best guess. This is 85 here. 276 runs this way. Here's 25.
Lots of Reedy and a couple of Enery.
Okay, awesome. Great. Moving on, let's go into our next kind of step of painting instructions. It looks like y'all are hard at work, and I'm so glad to see that. Now we can go ahead and start adding in some more details. So again, continue to darken those mountains, darken the around the river, start to add some outlines and borders if you want to. Here I used a lot of browns and some darker greens mixed in. Those are some of my favorite colors, so I just went with that. But go ahead and whatever kind of feels right. If you wanted to start adding some little darker details too, maybe to your sky, a couple birds or things like that, if it started to dry already. You can add some dimension to the water by mixing a little bit of black in with your blue, or maybe a little purple to give some look of flow or lines as well. I added some grass looking things on my riverbank by using really small the very tip of my brush and just doing some vertical strokes all the way through there. And then blended a little bit into the river with just a little bit of water on my brush. Again, if you want to test your colors on your newspaper, your paper towel next to you before you put them on your painting that's already started, that's a great choice as well. You know, I was getting a little nervous. I didn't want to ruin my good work as I was going earlier. All right, and as you all work on some of those, we're gonna keep talking about watersheds. Actually, what I have to show you now is a video, and the video is from Roper Mountain Science Center. It's meant for a 5th grade class, so that's why it's a little bit out of context, but it has a great example of our watershed model that we use in person at live classes, and talks a lot about how water flows through Greenville County. So please enjoy. This is Rashane Robbins at Roper Mountain.
Now, this is a watershed model from Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. And we're going to kind of look at this. We have those forested regions up here, and that Table Rock Reservoir that we were just looking at is right here. Now, a lot of water, think about the water cycle, it can come through rain and stuff, but also from these mountain springs is where we're going to get some of our drinking water. And a lot of the heads of rivers are going to start way up here, and we have several reservoirs up here. Now, you might be noticing these lines. These lines are not city lines, they're not road lines. This map is of watershed divides. So this big one right here that you're seeing is the Saluda, and that's the South Saluda, and some of them are divided even smaller. So let's actually zoom in a little bit. All right, so let's orient ourselves. This is Roper Mountain. This is where we are in Greenville, South Carolina. And we are actually on a divide. One half of our mountain, the water sheds toward the Emma Reedy watershed, and the other half divides toward the Upper Reedy. How cool is that? And this is Paris Mountain up here. Now, there are a couple river systems that we can see over here. So this one is our Reedy River, and that actually starts way up here in Travelers Rest. And this is the Saluda River. So those are two of our main river systems here. Now, we're going to add some precipitation, and I want you to take a close look. And when you can see that it goes through Falls Park, where the Liberty Bridge is in Greenville, maybe like raise your hands, find a way to track when it goes through here. So keep a close eye on that. You might also see when it starts going through the Saluda, or maybe even our other river systems neighboring it. All right, so keep an eye on that. I'm going to start our storm here. All right, so I have precipitation going down on my area here. Remember, keep an eye on it. Oh, I see some of it. There it goes. Oh, look how fun that is. Absolutely, yes. So all that precipitation is going to collect and go through our river systems. Some of it will soak into the water, become groundwater, and some of it will go into our river systems. Now, I want you to think about something. Remember when we said the House 2 pollution was released from it? If pollution is released from Greenville area, who is going to be most affected? Is it the mountain region?
So that is one of my favorite lessons that I've seen for classes anyway, related to stormwater, landform changes, and watersheds as well. That model, we could see the Reedy River and we could see Falls Park there. And the last question that Roshane asked was a really interesting one. What happens to potential pollutants or sediment that is picked up in the Greenville area? Where does it go and how does it affect maybe natural landscapes or other people and places? And we're going to talk about that towards the end of our evening tonight. So Greenville's drinking water, on that note, I mentioned before, it's delicious. It's consistently ranked as like some of the best, most delicious water in the United States by many different like blogs and things like that I've seen anyway. And I am from Minnesota. I agree, this is some of the best city drinking water I have ever tried. But the question is why? And I think we take a lot of pride in it, but it's those forested regions that Roshane mentioned that really make Greenville's drinking water so special. Greenville Water actually owns about 30,000 acres of land around two of the major reservoirs that feed into our drinking water systems, and that's Table Rock Reservoir and Poinsett Reservoir. Poinsett is located in the North Saluda watershed, which we already talked about. The Saluda watershed is in part of Greenville County. And then the Table Rock Reservoir is actually that one that you see some real beautiful pictures of, and I think it's the Caesar's Head hike that you can see the whole reservoir. Now, the thing that Greenville Water will do occasionally is refer to that area as the Greenville Watershed. That's not technically correct. There is not a Greenville watershed. It's really a protected area around water sources or reservoir. So part of the reason that that area has been so well protected is because it's owned by Greenville Water, and they have set a lot of restrictions on what kind of use that area can have. So cars can drive through there, but people aren't allowed to recreate in the water. You can't stop your car there, no boats, no anything in that water. And it's surrounded by these natural filtration systems. Roots, trees, plants, animals even help filter water. So I just think we're so lucky to have that in our at our disposal, really, and for somebody to have had the foresight to purchase that land and preserve it. I also mentioned Lake Keowee here. As Greenville continues to grow, we have to look for new water sources. So Lake Keowee was added a little bit later as a water source for Greenville drinking water. Those of you that have been around Greenville for a while may know that originally, way back, and I don't know the date specifically, Greenville's drinking water actually came from Paris Mountain. And if you've hiked in Paris Mountain State Park, there's that little like stone structure, and it's a dam. That's where our drinking water used to come from, but it can't meet the needs of Greenville citizens anymore, the population, so they looked further north or further towards the north part of the county and our watershed to find bigger sources of drinking water. Any questions on that? I think this is fascinating. Okay. If there are no questions, we'll go ahead and continue. So I mentioned stormwater. This is a little bit of a leap, but not too much. I mentioned stormwater and that we would talk about it, right? Stormwater and watersheds. What feeds water through a watershed? Gravity. Where does that water usually come from? Stormwater. What is stormwater? Any kind of precipitation that falls from the sky is considered stormwater. Rain is the easy one, but also sleet and snow and ice and anything else that falls from the sky. That water is always carried directly into local waterways. It doesn't matter if it falls on a forest or on a street. In urban areas, stormwater goes into storm drains, which lead directly to a waterway. That water is not treated, it is not filtered, it just goes directly into the nearest waterway. So I have a question for y'all as well. Another question, where do you think the water from your yard goes? Do y'all have maybe a tributary or a small stream in your backyard? Do you think it just soaks into the ground? You don't have to answer, but I want you to kind of think about it. When it rains, where does that water go? So in my experience, and what many experts will say too, is stormwater will look to stay as close to where it falls as it can. So if it can infiltrate into your ground, that's the ideal situation. But we're going to talk about it in a minute. Urban areas and urbanization will change what stormwater does to our landscape and to our waterways. All right, some more painting instructions. I can see that everybody's into what they're doing, which is great. If you wanted to start to add some more smaller details, areas of your painting should be dry now. I made a little fence and added some, I don't know, flowers, some kind of plants growing in there. You could also maybe create a small building or something like that using whatever colors you would like. If you choose to put a lighter color over a darker one, just know that you'll probably have to add a couple layers of that and let those dry in between. I also added some clouds to my sky by taking a piece of tissue or a piece of paper towel, getting that wet, and then just dabbing a little bit into my skyline to get that cloud effect. They're very faint in this picture, but they are there. Now would be a good time too to just redefine any lines that were maybe erased or have been messed with as you've started to add some details. If you're really talented, maybe adding some birds to the sky or some animals or people to your foreground. I'm so excited to see what everyone comes up with. Okay, so as y'all work on some details, I have another question. How does urbanization impact water quality? And if y'all have just like a 1 or 2 word answer, want to type it in the chat box, I'd appreciate it. But how do you think urbanization affects or impacts water quality?
Got some good answers. We've got negatively, we've got it limits it and or floods, causes more flooding, contamination, harder to absorb the water. Flooding is a very popular answer.
Great. Those are all good answers. Thank y'all for participating. And you're right. All of those answers are correct. Flooding is obviously something that we experience a lot in Greenville, and it is due to urbanization in a big way. And that is due to the increase in impervious surfaces. Impervious means that things just don't absorb into it. So we're talking asphalt, we're talking rooftops, we're talking parking lots, any kind of building, any kind of non-natural material that doesn't allow for water to absorb through it is considered an impervious surface. So that reduces or makes impossible water infiltration where it falls, which means all of that water, all of that stormwater rushes to the nearest waterway, which then creates this huge influx and causes a lot of flooding. I don't know if y'all have seen Cleveland Park when it floods, but that is a mess for like a week afterwards too. It also, urbanization also increases the potential for pollution. And that is due to a number of things, but more people and a bigger concentration of people mean a bigger concentration of a lot of things that we enjoy in daily life, right? Vehicles, lawnmowers, motorcycles. Maybe if you're a kid, you have an ATV or a four-wheeler. All of those things will increase as urbanization grows as well. What pollutants come from small engines? Engine oils. And actually, non-point source oil or engine oil, pollution from that is equal to the same amount of pollution from the Exxon Valdez oil spill over the course of a year, or more than. So that's a really big thing. Other things that increase when urbanization increases, pets tend to increase in a specific area, which means pet waste also increases. Pet waste carries harmful bacteria like E. coli primarily, that once in the waterways actually doesn't die. So we have to be sure that we're picking up after our pets. Is it natural? Yes. But in the quantities and in the concentration of pets that Americans have, it's too much for the natural environment to filter out and deal with. So we have to be responsible for that. Also, vegetation changes mean a change in water quality too. Like I talked about earlier, roots and natural forests and natural systems are the best filters of water. But when we tend to urbanize, we also like to be in control of what our backyards look like. That can mean adding in vegetation that isn't native or natural to the area, changing the way that water interacts with that soil that is able to hold water, and maybe it's holding less water or likes a different kind of soil, so we change the environment to function for what our needs are and don't always think about the impact on water quality. Any questions on that? That's a big one. Okay.
Could you repeat the statistic on the Valdez oil spill? I feel like I missed the first part of that, but it sounded important. I didn't.
Yeah, I can repeat that. So non-point source oil contamination in water is equal to the quantity of oil spill from the Exxon Valdez oil spill. I don't remember the year on that, and I don't know exact numbers of like quantity of oil, but it's a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? We'll keep going. If you have questions, again, type them in the chat box or ask. That's fine by me. So why are watersheds important? That's where we started with all of this. I know I kind of went down a rabbit hole with pollutants, but that's what my office does. We are here to teach y'all about everything related to water and water quality. We are always in a watershed. At every point in our lives, we have been in a watershed. And I think it's really important to understand how what I do impacts communities and habitats around me and that I maybe don't know. So what I do to my land here in Greenville will actually affect people in Greenwood because they have to use the water that flows through my community. And so they'll potentially have to treat their water more or do something different than I would have to if I'm adding pollutants or contaminants or anything like that to the water that reaches them. It also gives us a lot of perspective on where our water comes from and where it goes to, like I just mentioned. But I also think that that's really interesting in thinking about how far does that water actually go? Water that travels through Greenville County arrives in the Atlantic Ocean. And we're going to come back to that in a minute, but I want to tell you all about something called the Gulf of Mexico Dead Zone. Just as an example of why it's kind of important to know about watersheds and how they function. So here we can see a picture of the United States and the watersheds that sit in the Great Plains. The Great Plains are known for their fertile soils, which means that there are lots and lots and lots of agricultural enterprises and operations in this area. As a result of conventional agriculture primarily, but a lot of other factors too, farmers use a lot of nutrients to make sure that they're getting the yields to meet the demands of consumers, especially in large-scale crop farming. In the past, that has been in a lot of excess, so we have extra nutrients in our soils, which will run off into water. All of these watersheds eventually drain into the Gulf of Mexico, creating what we know as the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, let me tell you why that happens. It's a really cool process. I'm going to use a lot of new words. Ask questions if you have them. The dead zone is essentially a hypoxic zone or an oxygen deficient zone in the Gulf of Mexico. How does that happen? Nitrogen, nitrates, and phosphorus feed algal blooms. Algal blooms grow, they need oxygen to survive. They use all the available oxygen or a lot of it in that water area, therefore making it impossible for other living things to survive or even try to live in this kind of highlighted area that we can see in the bottom picture here. What does that mean for impact on human life, on aquatic life? Well, aquatic life dies and has to move out farther, but also there are some species that just can't live there because they can't live in the deeper water. So they'll go elsewhere or die. The other thing, it changes how maybe like shrimpers have to work. They have to come out a lot farther to find what they're looking for. And how many of us enjoy shrimp. I do occasionally, but this makes their job that much more difficult as well. How big is this? It is, I think it's like 6,000 square feet. And at its largest in 2017, the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico was the size of New Jersey. The size of the dead zone will fluctuate with time of year, depending on rainfall and what crop season or cycle we're in and all of those kind of things. But it's a really big conundrum because the people that are way up in maybe, I don't know, northern South Dakota or North Dakota aren't maybe thinking about the Gulf of Mexico when they're applying maybe a little bit of extra nitrogen to give their corn that extra boost this year. Or maybe when they're even applying like some fertilizer to their lawn, that impacts water quality as well. But they're not necessarily thinking about what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico because it's not in their backyard. but it does impact that at the end of the day. So how can we prevent something like this from happening, let's say, in Charleston? Or in the Atlantic Ocean right off the coast of South Carolina? We can be cognizant of what we do each and every day. This is just a picture. Here's a better picture of how the waterways work in Greenville, and we can see the kind of some of the cities that our water will run through as well. I find this really cool. So how do we care for our waters? Like I said, be mindful of what goes down every single drain, whether it's your kitchen drain, a storm drain, or I don't know, your bathtub drain. Don't put things in there that you wouldn't want the people in Greenwood to find in their water. Obviously, house water and sewer systems go through a completely different treatment cycle than stormwater does. But we can be really, really mindful of what goes in storm drains, especially because that won't be treated until if or until it reaches a water treatment facility in the next place that it goes. Preventing erosion is a really great way to help preserve water quality and care for our waters as well. Sediment is little particles of anything that end up in water. Sediment can carry pollutants as well very easily. How do we prevent sediment? Easiest way, cover up soil, put mulch over it, plant something in it. Tell your neighbor to plant something in it. Maybe just throw some wildflower. Don't throw seeds in random patches of bare soil, but cover it and encourage others to cover bare soil as well. Participate and educate. Just by being here tonight, you're caring for water as well, painting and learning about local waterways. We have a website, greenvillecountysoilandwater.com or gcsoilandwater.com. That has a ton of information. We have community programs available for you all to participate in as well. Everything from discounts on pet waste stations to poop fairy signs to educational opportunities on anything related to water quality. There are also a plethora of local social media accounts that do a lot to educate Greenville County citizens and upstate citizens on ways that they can support water quality and water health. We are GC Soil and Water. Clean Reedy is the Reedy River Quality Group, and it is a group of all the big players of water in Greenville County caring for the Reedy River. That's a really, really cool group of people. Friends of the Reedy River, I bet a lot of you have heard of them. One of the coolest things they do are river cleanups, and they'll organize groups of volunteers to go clean up sections of the Reedy River. Save Our Saluda does some very similar things as well. So I encourage y'all to follow them, learn a little bit more, get involved as much as you can, but really the most important and the best thing that you can do is something small in your own backyard, whether that's making sure you pick up after your dog everywhere or planting maybe some native plants to cover some bare patches of soil. That's really very, very, it can be very simple. It doesn't have to be a giant gesture, just something little every day to make sure that our water is clean and healthy for us, for the people downstream, and for future generations. With that, I ask, what questions do you have? And if you're finished with your paintings, I would love to see them.
I have a question. So regarding like biggest threats to the area, so you spoke to, the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, but I'm curious, like maybe not necessarily specific to this area, but South Carolina more generally, what are the greatest challenges that you all find with protecting watersheds in the area?
In the Greenville area specifically, we deal a lot with non-point source pollution. So that's anything that we can't trace back to a specific place. If y'all have ever heard the stories of like the colorful Reedy River when textile plants used to dump their extra dye into the river, that's a point source pollutant, and we're able to kind of tackle that. But now the biggest thing is kind of these general pieces, like I mentioned, motor oils. Oh my gosh, I'm going to blank on them now. Pet waste, fertilizers, pesticides, and all of those. It's the little things that everybody contributes that's the most difficult thing and the biggest threat to the health and safety of our waters. So it's really general education and asking people to change habits, which takes time. Great question. Thank you. Does that answer it for you?
Oh yeah, it definitely does. Thank
Okay.
you.
Other questions? All right, y'all. Well, I appreciate your time so much. Again, my name is Shanine Haler. I work with Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District. Clean Water Starts With You. That's one of our biggest campaigns, and it really does. Reach out to me at any time with any questions. Also, if you want to email me pictures of your paintings, I really want to see these. I'm so excited for this class. Oh, that looks so good. Yes. My phone number is also there. If I don't answer, leave a message. Happy to. Oh, that's beautiful too. I love the purpley mountains. They look so good. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm gonna stop screen sharing now. But thank you all so much for your time tonight.
Before you go, I'm going to just switch this to gallery view. If you can hold up your canvas, I'd love to get a view of everybody's work. Oh my gosh, gorgeous. Beautiful. I'm just going to take a quick screenshot. Oh, that's amazing.
Oh, those trees. Oh, those look so good. I'm so embarrassed by mine now. Wow.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us for Paint Your Watershed. Be sure to stay tuned for our next Gardening and Sustainability Live event. In the meantime, check out our online calendar for all of our other content or watch on-demand classes on our adult virtual activities page. And by attending tonight's event or watching it on demand, you have already ticked off a square on your winter reading challenge, and that's the Take a Virtual class. So between that and the free space, you've already got 2 slots done, and you have until March 1st to finish this challenge. If you want another great tip on gardening and sustainability and arts and crafts, be sure to use your library card. Your library card is your ticket to so many free resources, databases, downloadables, streaming, things like TV, ebooks, audiobooks, music, not to mention all of the physical resources like books and DVDs, and hey, even kits like the Paint Your Watershed kit or the Hygge kit, which is available now on our winter reading page. Plus, you can always get more seeds for your planters, for your gardens, just by checking out the seed library page and visiting our Berea branch. That's the one that houses our seed library permanently. But stay tuned for pop-ups at a branch near you. Finally, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and sign up for our e-newsletter so you never miss other fun events like this one. Thank you so much to Shanine, to Greenville County Soil and Water Conservation District, and to you. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.